The Something You Should Know podcast today is sponsored by Audible.com. You can get a free audiobook download, any title they offer, plus a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/SYSK. There are thousands and thousands of titles to choose from. Get your free audiobook and 30-day free trial by going to audibletrial.com/SYSK. That stands for Something You Should Know. audibletrial.com/SYSK. Today on Something You Should Know, the technique museums use to hang art on a wall that makes it much more pleasing to the eye. Plus practical tips to save time and money, from when to buy ketchup, the best time to go to the bank or post office, and the best time to fly.
Airport rush hour mimics highway rush hour. So if you fly at noon, think of the highways. There aren't a lot of cars on the highways at noon. Same thing in an airport.
And are you leading a life that makes you happy? If not, you may come to regret it.
Imagine you're 95 years old and you're on your deathbed. What advice would the old you have for the you that's here now? And some friends of mine ask old people that question. The number one answer is be happy now. Not next week, not next month, not next year. Be happy now.
All this today on Something You Should Know.
Something you should know. Fascinating intel, the world's top experts, and practical advice you can use in your life today. The Something You Should Know podcast with Mike Carruthers.
Hi, it is time for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the Something You Should Know podcast. I'm Mike Carruthers. Glad to have you here. And I've always loved those little fascinating facts that people come up with that save you time and save you money. And you are going to get a boatload of some really good ones today. I mean, this episode for sure you should download and keep just for this reason. You're going to discover things like the best days and times to fly, or to go to the bank, or work out at the gym. Well, when to buy a winter coat if you're in the market for one and get the best deal. Plus, when you group pictures together on the wall, you probably line up the perimeters of the frames in some design or some fashion. But if you'll notice, that's not the way museums do it. There's a trick to hanging art or groups of photographs together that is much more pleasing to the eye, and you will discover how to do that. Plus, Marshall Goldsmith. He's considered one of America's top leadership coaches and authors. He has a book out called Triggers that's really fascinating, and he has some thoughts and ideas he's going to share that could very well help you get motivated to succeed in an entirely new way. Let me begin today by talking about the pictures on your wall. When you hang groups of pictures, most people line up the edges of the frames. In other words, they line up the tops of the frame so they're all even, or they line up the bottoms of the frames. But if you went to a museum, you would see that's not the way they do it. According to Toby Camps, he is the senior curator at the Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston, Texas, you should line up the centers of the individual pieces. The eye perceives harmony if the centers line up, not the tops and the bottoms of the frames. So when hanging pictures side by side or above and below, align the center point of each piece. Also, the center of each piece should be the same distance from the center of all the other pieces. And here's another art hanging tip that museums know. Don't put profile portraits of people in the corner of a room, because otherwise it looks like the person is about to run into the wall. And that is something you should know. I love the fact that people study and investigate just about everything. And the results of all of that study and investigation can sometimes be some very helpful advice. Mark Vincenzo is one of those guys who does all that studying and investigating, and he is the author of several books, one being Buy Ketchup in May and Fly at Noon. And in the next few minutes, you are going to hear some great tips to make your life easier and that will save you money. So hi, Mark. Welcome. And so why should I want to buy ketchup in May?
You should do that if you want to save money. See, May is the beginning of picnic season in a lot of places in the United States and Canada. And so grocery stores put ketchup, mustard, relish, picnic-related items on deep discounts in May, starting in May, usually the middle of May. They do that to lure shoppers into the stores so that they will buy those things plus regularly priced items.
So they're kind of lost leaders.
They are not quite lost leaders, but they're close. They're really deeply discounted, and the grocery stores will shed tears if you just go in and buy those things and walk out. They really want you to go in there and buy their regularly priced items as well, where they're going to make a higher profit margin.
Why should we fly at noon? I was always told first thing in the morning because the plane's more likely to be on time.
Well, there's a little bit of truth to that, but really, airport rush hour mimics highway rush hour. So if you fly at noon, think of the highways. There aren't a lot of cars on the highways at noon. Same thing in an airport. If fewer flights take off at noon, you have shorter lines in the airports, and you have just less stress. You're much more likely to have no one sitting next to you on a plane if you're leaving around the noon hour.
What's the best day of the week to work out?
It's Monday. Monday's the best day of the week because those who work out on Mondays are more likely to work out more often that week. It sets a psychological tone. If you work out on Monday, you're kind of putting yourself in that mood, and you're more likely to work out more often throughout that week.
Well, that's certainly the week that the gym is more crowded. So some people are working out on Monday and not coming back because Monday is always the most crowded day. At least that's my experience.
That's true. I know that's true that some people just work out on Monday, but the statistics show that if you do work out on Monday, it's much more likely that you're going to come back at least one more time that week, if not 2 or 3 more times.
What's the best time of day to go to the post office and the bank?
Well, with the post office, it's 30 minutes after your post office opens. When your post office first opens, very often you're going to see a line, people wanting to get their post office errand run before they go into work. But after that initial rush, it slows down. You can get in and out of the post office much quicker if you just wait about 30 minutes after it opens. And with the bank, think middle. Think middle of the day and middle of the week. Banks are more crowded on Mondays and Fridays, and they're more crowded at the very beginning of when they open and toward the end in the late afternoon when people are getting off of work, trying to get their bank errand run before they go home.
And February is the best month to buy a winter coat and a camera?
Winter coats can be discounted as much as 80% in February. The logic there is pretty obvious. The stores assume that you've gotten your winter coat by February, so whatever they have left they want to get rid of. They'd much rather sell it at a huge discount than to have it trucked away and put in a warehouse and sold to a wholesaler or sent back to another store several months later. With a camera, the reason February is such a good month to buy cameras is the newer models tend to come out in the winter, in January and February, and retailers need to make room for those newer models. So they typically discount cameras 30-40% to make room for those newer models. And the models that they're discounting are almost just as good, if not just as good as the newer cameras they're getting. So it's a great time to get a great deal, especially President's Day weekend. President's Day weekend sees some of the best camera sales of the entire year.
Let's move on then to your pinky more powerful than your thumb. What's up with that?
Yeah, well, most of the strength you get is from your pinky finger and your ring finger. And you would lose a whopping 50% of your hand strength without a pinky. And if you don't believe that, ask a golfer to try to swing a club without using their pinky. The downside is the pinky, of course, is on the end of your hand. You're twice as likely to break a pinky finger than any other finger because of where it is in your hand.
Talk about the common and safe passwords.
Yeah. You would think in this day and age with identity theft and, some brilliant computer hackers out there that people would be more clever about coming up with the passwords that they come up with. But the most common password is 123456. About 1% of all computer users still have that password. And the next most common password is 12345. So people are, we have so many passwords we need to remember. So sometimes people try to come up with a real easy one, but those easy ones are the ones that are most likely to make you a victim of a computer hacker. The experts tell you that the best passwords have at least 12 characters, and not just letters, but also numerals sprinkled in between the letters.
But how are you going to ever remember that?
Well, that's the trade-off. Much more difficult to remember, much less likely that you'll become a victim of a computer hacker if you've got a longer password like that.
I heard a great tip that I've actually used, and that was you can use really complicated passwords and just remember one password, which is your password to Google Docs, and keep all your passwords in there, and you can access them from anywhere, and then you got them. Yeah,
that's a great tip. That is a great tip. I've heard the same thing, and I know a lot of people who do that because, we all know we've got dozens of passwords to remember, and
right.
It's tough.
How many more American lives are saved when gas costs $4?
Yeah. When gas costs $4, drivers usually react by staying home more often and driving less and driving in a more careful way, in a more economical way. And as a result, when gas gets up to about $4 a gallon, about 1,000 American lives are saved every month just from people driving less and driving less crazy. There's a researcher who says that for every 10% rise in gas prices, fatalities are reduced by 2.3%. So that's the silver lining of high gas prices. More of us are around.
What are the healthiest foods that are easy to find but we don't buy?
Yeah, there are a lot of healthy foods out there in the grocery store, in almost every grocery store, that doctors wish we ate more of. And a lot of these foods I'm going to mention, you probably don't buy. I'll just go through the list really fast. Beets, cabbage, Swiss chard, cinnamon, pomegranate juice, pumpkin seeds, sardines, frozen blueberries, and canned pumpkin. These are in every grocery store, and they very rarely show up in any of our carts, but they're full of cancer-fighting enzymes and nutrients and antioxidants, all sorts of good stuff.
And if we're selling our house, painting our walls neutral.
Yeah, there was a fascinating study done. It took a group of people who were looking to buy a house, and they showed them a house with neutral-colored walls, identical house, showed them another house exactly the same, except in this house there was a bedroom painted bright pink. They asked these home buyers to value these houses. They didn't tell them what the asking prices were. They said, value these prices. And in every case, the prospective home buyers said that the house that had a bright pink bedroom was valued at $3,500 less than the house that did not have a bedroom painted bright pink.
Any theories as to why that is? What is it about pink that devalues the house?
They don't know exactly why, except that they feel like the bright pink color is turning off home buyers. It's making them feel like the house is cheaper, and that is that's one of the mysteries. But a lot of real estate agents will tell you that when you go to sell your house, repaint the walls with bright colors because it is a turnoff. Fact is, so many people cannot look behind something like that. They can't put in their head, well, you know what, I can spend $25 on a gallon of paint and I can change the color of that room. But, you know, it sounds so logical, but people tend to not do that.
Well, great. That is a wealth of practical, use-it-today kind of advice to save time and money. I appreciate it, Mark. Thanks. Mark Vincenzo is author of the book Buy Ketchup in May and Fly at Noon. There is an Amazon link to his book on the show notes page for this episode of the podcast, which you will find at somethingyoushouldknow.net. The podcast today is sponsored by Audible.com. You know, so many of my guests on this podcast are authors who have books available at Audible.com. My next guest, Marshall Goldsmith's best-selling book, Triggers, which he is going to talk about in just a moment, is an audiobook at Audible, and it's a $25 audiobook, but you can download it for free if you take advantage of the great offer that Audible is offering. You get to download one free audiobook, any book, and get a free 30-day trial to their service by going to audibletrial.com/SYSK. That stands for Something You Should Know. Audiobooks are a great and unique way to consume a book in the car or relaxing on the beach, wherever. You've really got to try it. And remember, they have something like 200,000 titles you can choose from. Just go to audibletrial.com/SYSK and sign up for your free audiobook download and 30-day free trial to their service. Do it now before you forget. Or maybe wait until you listen to Marshall Goldsmith's interview that you're about to hear and see if that isn't the book you want to download. You'll save $25, and it's a great book. So it's audibletrial.com/SYSK. As I'm sure you well know, life has a way of throwing curveballs at us. Events, people, things, they all pop up every day, and those things can get in the way of what we know we should be doing. Marshall Goldsmith calls those things and events triggers. And it's also the title of his latest book. Marshall Goldsmith is a top leadership coach and author. He's written something like 17 books, I believe, several of them bestsellers. And he's here today to talk about triggers. Welcome, Marshall. And so explain triggers in a little more detail than I did.
A trigger is any stimulus from our environment that impacts our behavior. So as we wander through life, we make these great plans about who we're going to become, and then every day we're bombarded with triggers, often unanticipated, that kind of take us off course.
Is that just human nature?
It's definitely human nature, and it's part of life. There's something I call the planner bias. When we make plans, we think the planner and the doer are the same people. The person planning to go on the diet is not that doer that's hungry and staring at the chocolate cake. And often life is very different for the person who's doing the doing than it is for the person who's doing the planning.
With all good intentions, and then everything falls apart.
Exactly. There's something I talk about called the high probability of low probability events. We never plan on a low probability distraction. We don't plan on a car wreck or your brakes don't work or somebody got sick because they're low probability. What we don't think about, there are a million low probability distractions that could occur. While the odds on any one of them might be quite small, the odds on something happening are usually almost certain.
Well, if that's just kind of the way it is, I suspect the reason you wrote a book was that because there's a way to combat this somehow.
Exactly. Well, let me tell you one thing I do, and it's something I highly recommend. I'm now going to teach you something that takes 2 minutes a day, costs absolutely zero, and will help people get better at anything. Now your listeners are probably a little skeptical, thinking, wait a minute, 2 minutes a day costs nothing. Help me get better at almost anything. Sounds too good to be true. I'll also predict half the people that start doing this will quit in 2 weeks. And you won't quit because it doesn't work. You'll quit because it does work. This is called the daily question process. How does it work? Every day you get out an Excel spreadsheet. Make a list of the most important questions you need to challenge yourself every day in life. Friends, family, health, business. Every question has to be answered with yes, no, or a number. Yes is a 1, no is a 0 or a number. 7 boxes across, one for every day of the week. Fill it out every day. At the end of the week, you get a report card. And what I always tell people in the corporations I work for is that report card at the end of the week is not going to be as pretty as the value plaque you got stuck up on the wall. Because when we do this every day, you know what you quickly learn? Life is really easy to talk and hard to live. This will help you get better at almost anything. You have to have the courage to do it. I pay a woman to listen to me describe my questions and answers every day. Why do I pay her to do this? Probably wouldn't have the courage to do it myself. It's just too hard. It works. It's not easy, though.
Well, true for so many things in life. We think we're going to do the right thing, and then we get distracted. We get torn or pulled into another direction, and it's hard to stay on course.
Well, the other thing is we have too much ego and pride, and we think we can do everything on our own. One thing I'm proud of is I kind of changed the world of executive coaching from, fixing losers to helping winners. My coaching clients, and 27 of them wrote endorsements for the book, these are CEOs or could be CEOs of huge organizations. They're mega successful people. And why do they have a coach? Because they want to get better. Why do the top 10 tennis players have coaches? Because they want to get better. Well, when we get over that shame about needing help, structure, direction, that shame about needing someone to help us, life gets a lot easier because we realize we don't have to rely on willpower to solve all of our problems because you know what? I tell people, for example, I'll teach a class. I'll say, how many of you need to be a better listener? Well, they'll raise their hand. Then I'll say, Joe, how many years you needed to be a better listener? And he'll say 20. I'll say, repeat after me. My name is Joe. I need to be a better listener, and I'm not fixed this by myself for 20 years. It's highly unlikely I'm going to fix it by myself next week. I need help, but it's okay. Just be comfortable with the fact nobody's perfect. If you could do it by yourself, you'd probably have done it by now.
Put that up on the wall. If you could do it yourself, you probably would have done it by now.
Exactly.
That's life right there.
That's it. That's it. That's why I pay somebody to call me every day, because you know what? If I could do it by myself, I wouldn't be paying somebody.
But do you think that in many cases you don't need to pay somebody, that anybody is better than nobody?
I totally agree. If you can get somebody to do it for free, don't pay somebody. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and it doesn't matter who you pick as long as they do it every day. I think your point is very well taken.
A lot of people go to a gym and have a trainer, not that they really don't know how to use the machines. They just need them there because you got to pay them whether you show up or not, so you're more likely to show up.
Well, almost every Hollywood movie star has a trainer. Just like you said, they know how to do the exercises. The trainer's not teaching them anything. All the trainer's there to do is just make sure they do what they know they're supposed to do. In most cases, I don't think you need somebody to tell you what you're supposed to do every day. You can write your own list. We probably need somebody to make sure we do it, though.
But talk about that. Do you think we know what we need to do every day, or are many of us deluding ourselves?
Well, I think we delude ourselves about how hard it is. I think if I ask most people to develop a profile of the person they would like to become, they pretty much tell me good things. Good with the family, good with the customers, in good shape. They would describe this wonderful human being. I think where we delude ourselves is the degree of difficulty to become that person. And we delude ourselves in the sense we think we have all this willpower that we're going to do it by ourselves. Generally not. In my book, I talk about 15 major delusions that stop us from achieving our goals. We believe the planner is the same as the doer. We think if we understand something, we're going to do it. We believe that we're going to have time next week. We believe that, by the way, tomorrow's going to be different and it won't be crazy anymore. And that all of a sudden we're going to get this time and everything's going to be sane and rational and we can achieve all of our goals next week. Well, those are all delusions. Tomorrow's probably going to be even crazier than today.
So the simple answer to corralling all that stuff and getting a handle on it is to do what?
Well, the first thing is figure out not just this big picture of who I want to be, how does this translate into my day-to-day behavior? And then how can I get some ongoing input to help me? What I do for a living is I coach executives. How do I do it? I interview everyone around the people I coach. I give them confidential feedback so I know what everybody thinks of them. I help them pick the 2 or 3 things that are going to make the biggest positive difference in their life. Then they learn to talk to people about their feedback, and they develop a follow-up system and measurement. And then we measure, do they get better? And in my coaching, I don't get paid if they don't get better. And better's not judged by me or them, it's judged by everyone around them. By the way, you can tell if someone believes what they're saying. Ask them a question. You want to bet on it? If they say, I believe it, but I don't want to bet on it, they don't believe it. They say, here's the money. They believe it. I bet on this every time. And you know what? They almost always get better.
Why is this so hard?
I think one reason it's so hard is that we underestimate temptation. We underestimate distraction. I have a little verse from a song there in the beginning of the book, and it says, do you know that song, Bird on the Wire? Like a bird on the wire. Anyway, it's a quote from the song. It said, there was a beggar leaning on his wooden crutch. He said to me, why do you ask for so much? Well, you see, the trigger was the beggar. Why do I ask for so much? Why don't I just be happy? Then the second verse is, there was a pretty woman leaning in her darkened door. She cried out, why not ask for more? Well, that's kind of the way life is. As we go through life, we are bombarded with these stimulus and idea. Oh, and we're also given an illusion. It sounds like this. The most popular Western art form sounds like this. There's a person. The person is sad. They spend money, they buy a product, and they become happy. It's called a commercial. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those before, but we see millions of those things every day. So we are constantly barraged with this message of, all I have to do is pay this money or buy this coach or read this book, and all of a sudden life's going to be just fine. Not quite so simple. It's the day-to-day work and discipline. It's basically having the courage to look in the mirror, the humility to admit we need to improve, and the hard part is the discipline to follow up day after day after day and make sure we actually do it.
Right. I mean, there's no shortage of books and seminars and God knows what that tell people, and they buy them with all the best intentions to change things, but people don't change.
Well, I'm one of the few teachers you've ever met that's actually measured that people go to my courses, do they do what I teach, and do they get better? And, the people who do the stuff get better. Not surprisingly, people who do absolutely nothing, well, I have good news, they don't get worse. They just don't get any better. They stay the same. Well, if you don't have ongoing measurement, discipline, follow-up, you don't have ongoing help, some ongoing structure, some ongoing direction, you're not going to get better because you read a book. And what do I tell my coaching clients? You're not going to get better because you have a coach. If you get better, it's not about me, it's about you. I mean, I can give you ideas, but you're the one that's got to do it. Arnold Schwarzenegger got a great quote. He said, nobody got muscles by watching me lift weights. Well, the key is not understanding the theory of weightlifting. You got to lift the weights. When my book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, was the number one best-selling business book in the United States, the number one best-selling diet book sold 10 times as many copies. Americans get fatter and fatter and fatter while purchasing more and more diet books. If buying diet books would make you thin, Americans would be the thinnest people in the history of the world. Well, you don't lose weight because you buy a diet book. You got to go on a diet.
And you got to stick with it. Oh,
another delusion is, well, once I get better, that lasts forever. Well, you see that in diets all the time. Once people start looking good, what do they think? I don't have to be on a diet anymore. Well, the bottom line is you got to keep going if you want to get better at something and you want it to be part of your life, you have to make it part of your life, and you have to at least try to do it every day, because if we don't, it's not going to last anyway.
Some people, though, seem to handle this kind of naturally. They what do they have? Some sort of self-motivation, what is it that makes those people more able to do this?
Well, I think, for everybody, it kind of depends on the task. Now, you see some people, and they're good at working out. You think, well, why don't they have a problem? Or, I've written 35 books, so you can say, well, that guy's got a lot of self-discipline. He's written 35 books. He has a PhD. But there are parts of my life where I just, like everybody else, suck, right? And everybody I coach, they've got you don't become a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company if you don't have self-discipline. They've got a lot of self-discipline. On the other hand, that doesn't mean they have self-discipline for everything. So I think the important thing is don't fall into what I call the superstition trap. Somebody behaves this way, they are successful, therefore they're successful because they behave this way. Everyone I coach is mega successful when they behave the way they behave, and every one of them is successful because they do a lot right and a few things that don't make any sense. Well, in my life, I'm pretty successful. I'm successful because of a few things, and last time I checked, I have quite a few things on my in spite of list. So how about you? My guess is you're, on the whole, a pretty successful guy, but you probably got a little something on the in spite of list.
Oh, yeah, that's quite a list, actually.
An impressive list.
But do you think that that even though those people who do this pretty well but still have a few things on that list feel just as bad about the things they don't do as the people who have lots of things on the list they don't do?
Well, actually, they're often more likely to correct the things that they need to correct than the people that have even more things to improve. You see, some of the greatest leaders I met, why are they great? They keep trying to get better. Why are they great? I mean, I'm coaching the CEO of Pfizer, and his feedback is very good. After a while, I said, I'm not sure you need me as a coach. He said, no, I want you to keep working with me. I said, why? He said, number one, I can always get better. And number two, though, I want everybody else to get better. And as a leader, I want them to see that I'm trying to improve. And that I'm not better than them or talking down to them. I'm just like them. Well, to me, if you want other people to try to get better, let them watch you try to get better. Don't give them sermons about the value of trying to get better. And I think we can all improve. Ironically, the answer to that question is, in many cases, I'm like all educators. The people I coach that want help the most are often the ones that need it the least. And the people that need help the most are usually the ones that want it the least.
Right. So you're preaching to the choir, really.
Well, kind of. I'm preaching to people that are already good who are trying to get better, not disasters who don't want to get better. And if you look at this school, right, which parents tend to show up? Usually the kid that's making all A's, their parent's there for the parent meeting. The kid that's flunking out, their parent doesn't show up. So there's kind of a, negative correlation between the attention the kid gets and how much they need that attention. That's definitely true in my life. And it's true, by the way, not just to me. It's true in almost any educational person's life.
But is it ever enough? Do you ever go, you know what? I did it and done. And that's it?
Well, I think you can do two things at once. One, you could try to get better all the time, and two, still be happy with who you are. I always have a case study I use. I say, imagine you're 95 years old and you're on your deathbed and you're just getting ready to die. What advice would the old you have for the you that's here now? And some friends of mine ask old people that question. The number one answer is be happy now. Not next week, not next month, not next year. Be happy now. And I think it's infinitely possible to be very happy with who you are and what you do and still work at trying to get better. The leaders I've worked with, who I think, the two greatest ones I've worked with are Alan Mulally, who just retired as the CEO of Ford. He was ranked in Fortune magazine last year as the third greatest leader in the world behind the Pope and Angela Merkel. Frances Hesselbein, who I had dinner with last night, was the CEO of the Girl Scouts. Peter Drucker said the greatest leader he's ever met. She's also ranked as one of the top 50 leaders in the world last year, and she's 99 years old. Well, I've known both of these people for years, and, they're always happy and upbeat and positive, and they're also always trying to get better.
And that is some pretty good advice. Thanks, Marshall. Marshall Goldsmith is the author of the book Triggers. There's an Amazon link to his book on the show notes page for this podcast episode on our website, somethingyoushouldknow.net. Fall is in the air, and nothing says fall like pumpkin pie. But just so you know, when you have pumpkin pie, you almost never have real pumpkin. Libby's Pure Pumpkin, which is the quintessential American canned pumpkin brand, is responsible for 85% of canned pumpkin sold in the world. But what is in the can is not pumpkin, not the orange pumpkin that you and I think of when we think of pumpkin. Real pumpkin apparently doesn't make very good pumpkin pie. So instead, Libby's grows a proprietary strain of tan-skinned Dickinson squash. And although Libby's does refer to it as pumpkin in appearance, taste, and texture, it more closely resembles a squash. In fact, its closest high-profile relative is really butternut squash. So how is that legal? Well, according to the FDA, it's tough to draw a hard-line designation between pumpkins and other golden-fleshed winter squash. The whole thing is a bit murky. So it's perfectly legal for Libby's and other canned pumpkin brands to label their product as pumpkin, but it's really squash. And that is something you should know. The Something You Should Know podcast today has been sponsored by Audible.com. For a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial to Audible's service, just go to audibletrial.com/SYSK. That's Audible.